Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to today's webinar on the Huntington Beach Advanced Energy Community. So this webinar was organized by myself, Kerry Garcia, your statewide local government energy efficiencies best practices coordinator, and I'll be moderating the rest of the day today for this webinar. So just a quick overview of today's agenda. I'm going to go over a brief intro to the Statewide Energy Efficiency Collaborative for those of you who may not be familiar with the program. And then go over some webinar logistics. From there, we'll go to our feature presentation on Huntington Beach's Advanced Energy Community, where UC Irvine's Advanced Power and Energy Program partnered with the City of Huntington Beach, Altura Associates, Southern California Edison, and Southern California Gas, and the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, or NREL, to develop tools to optimally design and operate an advanced energy community in the Oak View community in Huntington Beach. So real quickly, just a little bit about myself as a coordinator. In the Statewide Energy Efficiency Strategic Plan, the CPUC, the California Public Utilities Commission, called for the creation of a coordinator to facilitate a statewide focus both in gathering and sharing exemplary policies, practices, and the sharing the tracking of progress of local government energy efficiency and sustainability at a statewide level. So as the coordinator, I work closely with our Statewide Energy Efficiency Collaborative, or SEEC, an alliance between the three statewide NGOs, including Local Governments for Sustainability, the Institute for Local Government, and the Local Government Commission, as well as the core investor and utilities that we have here in California. So together, we support local governments in their efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and save energy. We do this through a number of different resources and services, such as ICLEI's ClearPath tools, ILG's Beacon Recognition Program, LGC's annual SEEC Forum, and various workshops, webinars, fact sheets, and guides. And so all these resources are available on our website to local governments at no cost. And just a few items, I mentioned the SEEC Forum, so that's coming up here this June, June 20th through 21st. You'll probably receive an announcement soon through my weekly update or other sources, but the registration will open up soon. And I also have another webinar coming up next week, May 2nd, on the general plan guideline update with the Governor's Office of Planning and Research. So before we get started with the rest of our presentation, just want to go over a few logistics. Everyone will be muted except for our panelists right now. Due to the large number of participants, we ask that you type your question into the question box. Feel free to submit those at any point during the webinar. We'll try to catch a few of them if they're lighter questions during the webinar. Or we'll set aside some time at the end to get into the weeds and some of the more detailed questions at the end. And so any questions we don't get into, we'll follow up with our presenters and make sure we have those responses when we send up a follow-up email. And lastly, this webinar will be recorded and it'll be available along with the PowerPoint presentations. And so now I'm excited to introduce our presenters today. So first up, we have Antonia Graham, Assistant to the City Manager and Sustainability Manager for the City of Huntington Beach. She'll be joined by Kirsten Graham, Administrative Aide with the City of Huntington Beach. And lastly, we'll have Robert Flores, Senior Scientist at UC Irvine's Advanced Power and Energy Program, and who was also the project manager for this Advanced Energy Community Project. So I will leave it to Antonio to get things started.
Thank you very much, Kerry. So we were lucky to partner with UCI. They approached the city about partnering on a grant application from the California Energy Commission through the EPIC program. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of what our project is about. As you can see, we're partnered with UCI, Southern California Edison, the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, Altura Associates, and Southern California Gas Company. So this presentation will feature an overview of what our Advanced Energy Community Project is. I'll talk a little bit about the Oakview community, which is located within the City of Huntington Beach, the vision of the project, some community challenges and outreach that we've conducted, and then I'll turn it over to UCI and Altura, who will talk more about the technical and financial details of the project, the current design, the design tools that have been used, and the future work of the project. So the goal of the project is to create a scalable, replicable, and cost-effective model for the future. What we envisioned for this project was that this design could be picked up out of Huntington Beach and plopped down in any urban area in Southern California, or California itself. The goal was to create extensible tools and a plan and design the integrated set of energy infrastructure and advanced energy technology approaches to convert our Oakview neighborhood into an advanced energy community. We received $1.5 million from the California Energy Commission through the EPIC program. UCI has a match of $320,000. Southern California Edison and Southern California Gas also contributed funds to this project. And again, the partners are the City of Huntington Beach, Altura Associates, NREL, SCE, and SoCalGas. So let me tell you a little bit about Oakview neighborhood. When people think of disadvantaged communities, they don't necessarily think of Huntington Beach. You know, we are a coastal community of about 200 and some thousand. High median income, average home price is close to $700,000. So when you are looking at CalEnviroscreen and you notice that there is a disadvantaged neighborhood in the city, it's kind of a surprise. But when you get closer and look into the neighborhood, you can definitely see why. It has a CalEnviroscreen of between 76 and 80%. It's located next to a materials recovery facility, which is in the process of being covered right now, which will reduce some of the environmental impacts. But right now it's essentially an open dumping ground. In the neighborhood, there's average household size is about 7 occupants. It's very dense. We estimate that there's over 10,000 people in 1 square mile. It has a higher crime rate than that of Orange County. Most of the people that live there lack a high school diploma or GED, and 97% of the students in the neighborhood qualify for free or reduced price lunch. The per capita income you can see is much less, $16,700 versus $31,400 for the whole entire county. But what's interesting about this community is it's a very tight-knit community. The people are all very hardworking. They're very active. They participate in city programs. Within the city itself, within the neighborhood itself, the city has a dedicated code enforcement officer. Additionally, there is a library that the city runs. The city runs, we have our own library system, and so there is a branch of our library in that neighborhood, and that neighborhood library has a number of after-school programs for kids. We just launched an energy efficiency program there that Kirsten will talk about a little bit later in the presentation. And then we have a community center, and there's also a family resource center within this neighborhood that the city runs. And then also in the neighborhood is a commercial industrial. I mentioned the materials recovery facility, but there's some industrial buildings there that are operated by different various businesses. There's a school and a preschool. And then primarily the neighborhood is residential multifamily. So within this neighborhood, most of the multifamily complexes are very old. They're pre-1985. And they're mostly 4 and 5 plexes. There is one large apartment complex called Terros, which you can see, which is much more of a traditional apartment complex. But then in the neighborhood too, it's interesting, we have some nonprofit housing providers, Orange County Community Housing Corporation and Jamboree. When we looked at the neighborhood, you can see there's various uses. There's a residential, commercial, and industrial. The industrial, I mentioned Republic Services, which is a waste processing facility. So trucks are going in there, dumping residential municipal solid waste and also commercial solid waste. But then it also has a public dumping area, so anyone can come and dump construction and demolition debris. And there's also a household hazardous waste collection facility at Republic Services. There's also the Family Resource Center, the school, and the library that I mentioned, and then some smaller commercial buildings. So it's a very diverse neighborhood, and that's why we really felt that this is something that could be replicated in a number of urban areas because it has a diverse land uses within it. So this is sort of the conventional community design that we all know, that we're all accustomed to. It's a linear model. It basically, the flow of electricity, natural gas, organic waste goes into the neighborhood and comes out as waste, whether it's emissions, solid waste, particulate matter. It's very much an old school sort of linear system. So we really wanted to transform this and turn it into an advanced energy community, which is on the next slide. So it's a more of a circular system. You know, you hear a lot about the circular economy. Well, this is a very similar notion in that you are treating everything stays within the neighborhood essentially in this instance, and you're able to utilize natural renewable energy sources. So this project has definitely not been without its challenges. You know, this, like I mentioned, this is a very, it's a tight-knit community. So we've had some challenges when it comes to education and outreach, but we're definitely working through those challenges. So for a lot of people, when you talk about energy efficiency or even climate change in disadvantaged communities, you know, these are people that are generally thinking about how are they going to pay their rent and feed their families. They're not necessarily thinking about energy efficiency or climate change. So it's not really a priority. It might be a priority in terms of reducing their costs, because then it puts more money in their pocket. But if you focus on other incentives like the health benefits, maybe the job opportunities and education for children, that rings a bell for them and it resonates a little bit more. Another challenge that we encountered was a lack of space for workshops. You know, the city runs a Spanish Citizens Academy, and we actually take a bus and pick people up to bring them to City Hall. So we wanted to do something a little different, and we decided to have the workshops in the neighborhood. So we utilized the Family Resource Center and sort of changed our outreach strategy to be very much more neighborhood focused. Initially, the city, a challenge that we had desired to utilize a Civic Spark Fellow, and many of you are probably familiar with this program. Unfortunately, our Civic Spark Fellow decided to move on, and so halfway through the fellow year, we lost her. And so we had to devote more city resources to doing the education and outreach. And luckily we have bilingual staff that were able to sort of pick that up and continue the work that she had started. And then we also hired a consultant that is very familiar with working in disadvantaged communities and on energy efficiency type programs. And so that really helped us meet the challenge of losing that Civic Spark Fellow, who we thought was going to be, you know, a really an ingrained part of the community. A fear that we had early on from the project, from some community members, was the fear of gentrification. You know, anytime you seek to improve building stock or a neighborhood, there's the fear that the property values are going to increase. And I'm sure that this is a legitimate fear. These property values will increase, the properties will be improved. And so we're trying to work through those challenges by educating the community, building trust, attending community events, and increased outreach to community leaders and social workers to let them understand that that is not the main goal of the project. It's definitely a challenge, and so we're working through that by building trust. That's primarily how we are meeting this challenge head on. Another interesting thing was the need for childcare. You know, we want to educate the community, but the community, you know, these are working parents who work multiple jobs. When they come home at night, they are not necessarily going to want to go to a class to learn about energy efficiency. So we allowed children to attend the workshops with their parents, and this increased the interactive learning experience for families. So it's something that they all did together. Really, the goals of the community outreach were to educate the community about the opportunities that are out there, and to educate the community about different energy efficiency technologies that would be deployed in the neighborhood. I also had a student that named Ashley Hoover from Cal State Fullerton, who's getting her master's degree in environmental studies, who came to me and wanted to work on her thesis, her master's project, and on a real project that was going on. And so we worked together to come up with this idea, and she has done an excellent job of creating a workforce development program and really looking at the green collar job opportunities that are out there. She is working to create a booklet that can be disseminated to the community so that they can see what education and outreach or see what educational opportunities are available through the deployment of these advanced energy technologies. And she has really been creative and has outreached numerous community colleges and workforce development programs to figure out how best to promote this. So as we outreach the community, we are letting them know about all the different types of opportunities there are out there to expand their career opportunities, whether it's solar installation, HVAC technicians, you name it. So this is a really broad workforce development plan that we've worked on. And even in her plan, she identified barriers. So what about a working parent who can't get to school? She researched how they would go, maybe get the bus, how, childcare vouchers. So this is a very exhaustive workforce development program that was created that really looked at everything, because how could we overcome barriers to get people more educated about the career opportunities that are out there for them? And with that, I'll turn it over to Kirsten Graham. She's not related. We just happen to have the same last name, to talk about our Loteria game.
Thank you, Antonia. So this is a quick sample of some of the literature that we developed for this program. We thought it was very important that everything be bilingual because it's a highly populated area of Spanish speakers. It was simple, it was attractive, it was informative, and it related to the roots of the community. So as Antonia mentioned, we had a Civic Spark Fellow, and she came up with the initial idea of developing a game that would teach participants about different energy efficiency and renewable energy technologies, and also about the project. So here we can see that we have some of the sample cards that were used to develop this game. We based it off Loteria because it is well known in the Spanish-speaking community. There's a lot of Mexican and Central American community members there who just right away recognized the images on our flyers. We did a small focus group and showed them two different versions of this same flyer. One was a lot more green, simple, modern looking, and they really liked this one. They could relate to it. They knew what these things were, and they were curious about the new cards that were developed, which inspired them to ask us questions about, why did you change this? What is this thing? What is the LED? And we'd say, it's the LED light bulb, and explain a little bit more about this this technology. So really here, we see, and these aren't the only cards that were included in the final game we developed, but we were able to not use it only to educate, but also as an incentive. We held workshops that we'll talk about in our next slide, and this game was used as the culmination to these workshops and a great reward for these families to use in their own homes, be able to share with their kids, families, friends, neighbors, because it really is a game that's really community-based, and we thought it was very important to develop this type of game. With that, we'll go to the next slide. So here's these workshops that I mentioned in the last slide. It was a series of 5 workshops. As Antonia mentioned earlier, we wanted to make sure that they were easily accessible. Classes were open to all. They were held on a weekly basis. We encouraged, participation. It was a little hard to do some outreach because there are a lot of services, a lot of nighttime classes that are available through the school and through the Family Resource Center located in the community. But we opened these classes to all. We had our consultant come in. I'm a fluent Spanish speaker. I would attend all of these workshops. And we gave them information about the project, potential benefits, so a little bit about the research, a little bit about energy savings tips. We had our utility come in one week and talk about potential incentive programs that could benefit the community participants. We really benefited from being able to interact with them on a weekly basis, have them come back and ask us a question, and have us be able to find a contact at SE or SoCalGas to, do some outreach to them and see how they could benefit, not just from the education about clean energy, but about, the things that were important to them at the time. We said we had to balance this interaction between education about energy efficiency and those real life problems that were, these urgent problems. And by being there those full 5 weeks and offering up, all my contact information and availability, they really saw that we were there to support them, to help them, and to teach them about this project. And it was a really good way to build a relationship with these families. And they would, invite their friends, and sometimes they weren't all attending at the same time, but it was really cool to see, like, hey, I brought my friend this week, she's coming next week. I can't come next week, but please give her the information to give me, and we'll all benefit together. And our final class, we were able to play this Loteria game, and it was really fun. We had all the kids involved. We had one of the moms calling out the cards, and with the game, we included a worksheet that had all the details about each of the cards that were related to energy efficiency. It gave a little overview of the project. It had all our partners. It had our city contact information on there. So they really saw that we were really involved. And that picture you see on the bottom left is one of our families that was had the highest rate of participation. This mother and her kids, they came for all of the sessions. They were very involved. They loved the games, the interaction with our consultant, and they had takeaways each week that they could go home and talk about. And here we have also a really good partnership with with Ashley Hoover, who is also the graduate student Antonia mentioned earlier. She actually works for the Energy Coalition. And when we talked about workforce development and about these other workshops that we were doing as education and outreach workshops, she mentioned that the Energy Coalition has this program that's called Out of School Time Energy Program, or OSTEP for short. And she thought, why don't we partner and see how we can have this as available to the Oakview community? So we partnered with the Oakview Branch Library and the Oakview Boys and Girls Club to have this series of workshops or classes for kids. And it's an after-school program. They're hands-on STEM lessons. Honestly, just saying STEM really attracted a lot of kids. I was able to go to the first workshop and help participate. And so every week we incorporate energy concepts, electricity, energy efficiency, renewable energy, water energy nexus concepts, climate and pollution concepts. And we actually, last week was a really cool thing that happened was we had UCI students come in with a fuel cell and talk about how, that isn't part of the curriculum of the OSTEP series, but it was the perfect way to incorporate the AEC project into this series and have the kids have these students that are studying all these different, jobs and workforce and engineering and fuel cell technology come in and interact with them. And with that, I'll pass you back over to Antonia.
So a lot of the work that Ashley did was, she incorporated a lot of research, and she identified 40 green collar options within the workforce development plan, from electrical engineers to electricians. So they ran the gamut from having a high school diploma to all the way to having a bachelor's and master's degree. But we also, a lot of what she did was really identifying the barriers. So she looked at the education and skill set that were needed for each job. She combed through every single community college in the area and to figure out, what kinds of programs that they had, what kind of graduation rate, what kind of job placement rate that they have. But then she really focused on something that I really believe is really important, is looking at the soft skills. For some of these people, college might have not been an option, and so this workforce development opened up new opportunities for them. So teaching, we worked closely with Cielo, which is a nonprofit social enterprise incubator that's based out of Golden West College, and they offer a lot of entrepreneurial skills and classes for people that live in the Oakview neighborhood. How to balance a checkbook, show up to interviews, resume writing, all sorts of things that that we generally don't think about. But for sometimes people in marginalized communities, these are things that they don't think about. So she really looked at everything, soft skills. She delved into what types of financial aid and financial programs are out there, and then supportive services for people that maybe have children or don't have transportation. She looked at everything from childcare to transportation to bus passes to even looking at working wardrobes to see what types of clothing might be available for people to go on an interview that might not have. So right now we're working on translating a lot of this information that you see into a book that will be passed out to the community and used with our education and outreach efforts. The work that she did on this is really phenomenal, and for a graduate student who works full time to put something together like this is really quite impressive. And once it's all done, I'm sure that she would love to share it. And we know that it's included in our project, and we definitely will be including it in our education and outreach. So, part of this project, before I turn it back over to Dr. Flores, we really believe in sharing the knowledge that we've gained with, this project, whether it's the technical knowledge, whether it's the community outreach, the workforce development. So we have a dedicated website within the city's web page, or a page within the city's website on the advanced energy community. We've presented at 12 conferences and counting. We've talked to the California Energy Commission. We have been to the Climate Leadership Conference in Denver this past year, the Huntington Beach Chamber of Commerce, Orange Sustain OC, Facilities Conference, and we even had a poster at the SEEK conference last year. And then we've had some press attention from the Daily Pilot and from the Orange County Register. There's Dr. Flores and Dr. Brower right there, the Daily Pilot, and there's Dr. Flores and Dr. Brower speaking with a community member. So we've been very thrilled to share what we've learned, and that's why we're presenting here today. And with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Flores.
Thank you, Antonia, and thank you, Kirsten. So we're going to have Jim McClay, who's working on our finance and business plan. He's working out of Altura Associates. So please proceed, Jim.
Yeah, thanks, Robert. So Altura is a private sector energy engineering firm, and we both design and implement these types of energy capital improvement programs. So if you go to the next slide, Robert, some of the aspects in terms of how we, both build up the project to meet energy efficiency, renewable energy goals, but also how we intend to actually fund this are some of the focus Altura has in this project. So we've got with exploring a wide breadth of funding availability and business models for these types of projects. Again, we've been broad thinking about how it may apply to other communities and with information that they could leverage to their specific conditions generally. But we've also specifically designed this around implementation of this Huntington Beach project, which we hope to move forward into an implementation phase where we'll leverage funding and get this in built. So a big part of that is how we establish partnerships with various organizations or product providers and other organizations that are working in this space. Some of the low-income incentive programs, funding at various levels, federal, state, local, utility. And obviously we have to explore a lot of creative ways to accomplish this. So it's a pretty dynamic process of engaging the resources that are out there and bringing them together as a team to move this thing forward. So it is a bit of a process as the design, technical design changes, and also the available resources and team members evolve. The next slide just shows some of the space that was explored as part of this financial and business model development. You can see there's various models that are out there that help finance some of these things. For example, a power purchase agreement is a common way to procure something like solar photovoltaics to get more renewable energy into the community without a large initial capital outlay. You're essentially buying that power at a negotiated rate and escalator. There's other types of structures that are similar that apply, to various project designs. There's loan programs that are out there. There's grant programs. There's rebates and incentives. So again, we're trying to encompass all of these potential opportunities and bring them together, both to provide general resources to any community looking to do something similar, but also to bring in very specific partners, processes, designs, and models for our project here. And I believe this goes back to UCI at this point.
Yes, thanks, Jim. So now we're going to get into some of the technical aspects of the project. And the very first one is we're going to talk about some of the AEC design tools. So if you remember back to the goals, there were really two goals. The second one being design an AEC for this particular community, but the first one being to develop tools to do AEC design. A lot of the technologies that we're looking at have rules of thumbs associated with them or other methods that they can be used to either simply estimate the benefit from these technologies or just to say, hey, yes, we should install these, yes or no. But as we move forward in the future and we have more renewables on the grid, but we also have more advanced technologies coming online and available to residential homeowners, but also commercial and business people, we're thinking that we're going to need tools that will be able to consider all the benefits of all these different technologies and select which ones should be implemented and what mix, what levels of integration. But also, if we zoom out, it's also important to consider this from the community perspective, right? No one lives on an island by themselves. So not only do we want to look at how our technology choices are going to affect our bottom line, but also how it's going to affect energy use throughout the rest of the community. So this section 4 is really looking at the AEC design tool. And there's one tool in particular that I'm going to focus on, and that's the tool that's being developed by NREL. So NREL, historically, they've developed the building energy simulation tool, Open Studio, which is based on Energy Plus. And this is, in our opinion, probably it's the world-leading tool for doing building energy simulation. One of the challenges with this tool, though, is you have to go in and design a building type for every single individual building that you're looking at. So if you imagine if we're going to do this at a community scale, like, say, a community with 300 plus buildings, like the Oakview community, it's going to be difficult to go in there and actually model all the buildings, right? So what the NREL team has gone and done is that they've come up with a method to automate this building energy simulation development process, the development process of building the models, and that's allowed us to create a tool called URBANOpt that we can do community scale energy modeling on. So this is a image here on the right side of the graphical user interface of the first URBANOpt prototype. And you can see here that in this image, this is actually the Oakview community. And what's important here is that we're able to model all 300 plus buildings. We're also able to model them taking into account what the end use of the building is. For example, is it a residential building? Is it a multifamily residential building? Is it a school? Is it industrial? And if it's industrial, can we modify the plug loads or the process loads? So currently right now it's closed development, but this is going to be one of the deliverables of our project is to produce this tool. Deployed currently at urbanopt.net. If you go there right now, you're going to be asked to log in with the user ID, so you won't be able to log in. But the main idea behind this is to be able to look at this entire community and consider each one of the energy efficiency measures we're thinking about implementing them, and then to use these physical building energy models to figure out exactly what the energy savings are. And from there, we can figure out what the cost benefit is also. So some of the capabilities that URBANOpt has, you can see here highlighted in the red, are the ability to design these scenarios, these customizable scenarios. And right now, URBANOpt has built into it the ability to capture multiple different type of energy efficiency measures. These energy efficiency measures include reducing space infiltration through adding caulking or by sealing the home, by improving the R value of your roof, by putting insulation in your roof and your walls, by getting energy efficient appliances, by getting LED light bulbs. So we can start to quantify how these different improvements are going to interact with each other. For example, if you go from inefficient lighting to an LED, that old inefficient lighting would have been helping to heat up your space. So if you remember going and getting near an incandescent light bulb when it's on, there's a lot of heat coming out of there, right? So if you switch to an LED, your heating load is going to increase a little bit because you don't have that waste heat. So it's going to capture all these interactions and allow us to really figure out what the benefit of each one of these technologies are going to be. And you can see here also that it also includes the aspect of possibly installing solar photovoltaic panels or producing on-site electricity. And they've been working with us to implement some ability to model solar photovoltaics, but also model how that's going to impact the local utility grid. But this is one of the major points of what's going to be developed through this project. So this next slide is going to show you some initial results from those 3 scenarios that I was showing you earlier. And this first column is going to be the baseline. This would be the community as it is today. The second one would be improved energy efficiency. And this third one would be improved energy efficiency plus some solar photovoltaics covering approximately 75% of the rooftop space. So this top plot, I just want to focus on this top plot. You can see here that this is monthly energy use going from the baseline case on the left-hand side to the center case. You can see that baseline energy case, those bars just go down. And this is looking at the entire community if we were to install these energy efficiency measures, what the overall benefit would be, what the energy savings would be. Then, of course, going to the next plot, directly to the right, you see that there are these green bars that peak in the summer, and these are associated with solar generation, installing solar panels across the community. So right off the bat, you can see the benefit of a tool like this. So we're able to look at all 300 buildings, look at the energy efficiency impacts of them, but also if we were to install solar photovoltaics. And it does it relatively quickly too. So instead of using ballpark estimates for every single individual building, we start to get to a more substantive, a more physical and grounded representation of what's physically going on in this community. So we're really excited about this. It's going through development. It's going to be one of the major deliverables of this project. Going forward, I want to talk a little bit about the current AEC design, and there's a lot of different technologies we're considering. We'll refer back to that diagram that Antonia was describing a little bit. But one of the main ones that we're looking at right now is solar photovoltaics. So we were talking about community scale energy efficiency. Now we're switching to community scale solar photovoltaics. So I'm an academic and I'm an academic engineer, so I'm looking at this from the perspective of the technical limitations of solar photovoltaics. So you think about the technical limitations, one of the first things that comes to mind is rooftop area. Not only rooftop area, but are the roofs able to even hold solar photovoltaics? And those are definitely a technical constraint. But one other constraint that we're considering here is the constraint on the local power grid. Basically, if we were to have solar on our rooftop, generate extra electricity, more than we're going to use on site, and send it back to the grid, can the local grid handle it? Are the wires big enough? Is the transformer, that big giant bucket-looking thing on the top of the poles, the wooden poles around us, the transformers, are those big enough? Are those sized so that we can actually send the electricity back, or are we going to have overloading of them? So before we go forward, I want to talk about the electrical infrastructure in this community. So here's the outline of the AEC, the Oakview AEC, and towards the right-hand side, you can see here that right in the center, there's a school with a nice, beautiful white cool roof that they recently installed. And to the right of that, that's the residential area, to give you a frame of reference. So if you look over here, there's actually a substation that connects the community to the transmission or the higher voltage, the transmission component of the electrical grid. And from this substation, the transmission level energy is stepped down to distribution level. Here's a picture of the substation. And it's distributed out through distribution lines. And you can see here, this green one, it's called the smelter line. And you can see there's a line that goes right up next to the commercial industrial corridor. There's also another line called standard that runs kind of parallel to the smelter circuit. Off of these circuits, we've got feeders that distribute the electricity, and these are the physical wires that run through the community. And of course, we've got transformers that step down that energy from the high voltage, 12,000 volts, down to the 110 volts that we're expecting to see from our wall sockets. Here's a residential sector, here's the schools and family resource center. And here are some pad-mounted transformers located in the commercial industrial section, which produce significant loads in our community. So what we did is we took this information that we got from visiting community, but also doing a lot of Google mapping, to translate this into a one-line diagram, or basically a diagram showing where all the wires went, which is shown here. And then we took this and translated it into a physics-based model, or a model that just captures all the electrical flows throughout the network here. And this is shown here. And I don't want you to read all of the little labels. It's actually impossible to read these labels. But the one thing I want you to take away with is that there are these green elements. And these green elements show that the system is running okay. There are no overloads. We're not putting too much energy through the system right now. And this is the system right here. Almost everything is green. This is the system with as is. That is as it is today, indicating that the system works as we would expect, which is kind of like verifying, okay, our model's okay, right? But the benefit of this is we can start to look at what if we had a lot of solar. So the next scenario is, what if we were to maximize our solar production and just plaster everything, use our constraint as our rooftop area, just cover everything with solar panels. You can see here this image, here's the same community picture, just with everything covered in blue solar panels. And to give you an idea of the size of this, the average community demand we're expecting would be about 2 to 3 megawatts. We'd be able to put about 15 megawatts of solar panels if we plastered everything. But then, of course, we've maximized our rooftop area, but what happens with the electrical grid? So you can see here, this is the exact same model with that scenario, and as a result of putting solar on everything, we're going to turn everything red, which means that we're going to be overloading it, which means you'd have most likely some point within this system where you'd have some type of failure, meaning that we can't cover everything with solar photovoltaics. So if we were to scale down and take into account not only the rooftop area, but also the local grid constraints, you can see that we're going to reduce our solar capacity from 15 megawatts down to about 6 megawatts. So it's a significant reduction. One thing I want to note, though, is that this accounts for no energy storage on site. So if you have excess solar, it's basically sent back to the grid. It also doesn't account for the ability to curtail energy. So the point of this really is to say our solar design is going to be somewhere between 6 megawatts with no storage, no curtailment, to 15 megawatts with some massive storage involved, or also some curtailment. We're going through the process of designing those as well also. And one of the last things I want to touch on is that this is work that APEP has been doing and Altura has been spearheading for us, is case studies. And what we mean by case studies is we know that there are a tremendous amount of different energy conservation measures, energy efficiency measures available. And also there's how much solar are we going to put in. Looking forward to our phase 2 implementation, which we are going to write the proposal for as soon as the California Energy Commission releases the RFP, the request for proposals. There's a budget associated with how much money we can spend, and that's a $60 million budget. So not only do we have the technical limitations and also like care about the economic return of these different devices and different technologies, but we also have a limit of how much money we have to spend or how much money we're going to have to spend if we were to win phase 2. So you can see here we got case studies A through P. And if you look over at the very far right side, you can see that there's this budget constraint, yes or no. No meaning that we can spend as much money as we want, get as much stuff as we want. We're just going to look at this on the basis of just return on investment and energy savings versus all the other ones where we've got, yes, some type of budget constraint. And you can see here on these middle columns, columns 2 through 5, ECM or energy conservation measure. And then next to that, we've got distributed energy resource or DER item 1 or 2. So the ECMs are going to be your energy efficiency, LED light bulbs, plug loads, things like that. And DER, of course, is going to be our photovoltaics and our energy storage. So you can see we're looking at a variety of combinations of all of these with different budget constraints. So I'm going to skip right ahead to the results which Altura produced for us. This is a busy plot, so please bear with me for 1 second. If you look here on the left-hand side, we're going to have project cost, and this would be the upfront investment cost. And this is going to be the green bars. Rate of return is going to be the red diamonds you can see here on every single set of these bars. If we look at the far right side, it's going to represent the blue bars. This is energy reduction. So what I want you to think here is that we want the red diamond and the blue bar to be high. We want rate of return and energy savings to be high. We want project cost to be low. One thing right off the bat to notice is case A, B, and C are the unconstrained budget cases, but these, for the most part, experience the best energy savings, but also experience the best rate of return. But you can see we need significantly more than $16 million worth of investment. So if we were to look at the $16 million constrained scenarios, you can see that they kind of go up and down, up and down. One that we really focused in on was this over on the far right, case O. You can see here, case O has got decent energy savings. It's not the best, but it's close to being the best. It's actually approximately the same as the best of all the budget constraints. Got a little bit lower rate of return. But the benefit of this is case O is that it includes technologies that we would be able to implement within individual people's houses. So from the perspective of garnering community support, we think that this is the best case because all the other cases that perform better typically tend to stray more towards investment in the commercial industrial side, or they tend to veer away from doing things within the individual residences. So since this is a disadvantaged communities, we care greatly about making sure that we're improving the residential aspects of the community in addition to the commercial, industrial, and the school. So we think that case O, which you can see here at the very bottom, has solar, battery energy storage, LED lighting across the entire community, but also appliances, which would constitute Energy Star appliances like newer refrigerators, newer appliances within the houses, but also domestic hot water retrofits. This presents a case where we can impact the community positively in a way that we're helping the disadvantaged community while also achieving our goals of reducing energy use in a cost-effective manner. This isn't the final design yet. This is a basis from where we've been going for the last few months. Other things we've been looking at, I'm not going to touch on this or expand upon it. There's a car share component. So we've been talking to some companies about possibly doing some electric car share to improve mobility within the community. But also we've been doing some work on a model to optimally do an optimal community solar, photovoltaic, and battery energy storage selection. So that would be to site them, figure out where the solar panels are going to go, but also figure out if there should be any energy storage. We're also working through multiple solar PV designs and business cases that Altura is working heavily on right now. Antonia touched on there's a waste transfer facility, so we've also been looking at the renewable gas that can be produced from the organic waste that's present there. So we've got some ideas about how much organic fuel or renewable fuel we can generate. And then, of course, something to make this advance, that would be looking at novel community control strategies. So to conclude, I'd like to end with this image, and of course this is the AEC, and this business has been an incredibly exciting project to work on. So you can see we're considering a tremendous amount of different technologies that are going to interact with each other in really interesting ways. And what makes this advanced is that we're considering all the benefits at the same time, but also looking at how they can be controlled and dispatched to not only reduce energy, but also to improve the grid operation at large, to improve quality of life throughout this region. So before we finish, I want to acknowledge a few people. Of course, California Energy Commission for funding this work, and our contract manager is Rachel. She's been incredibly helpful. Carrie Garcia, thank you for helping set up this webinar. And also Antonia Graham, thank you for your work in getting this project started and garnering support at the Huntington Beach City. Of course, I didn't include here, I should have, I'm sorry, but thank you to Altura and NREL for your hard work on this project and helping us progress this and add different insights to the project. We've also been talking with the Ocean View School District, and here's their the head of the school board, Gina Clayton-Tarvin, and they've been very supportive in our project. And then, of course, Republic Services, the waste transfer station. And then also, we'd like to thank everyone involved at the Oakview community level, everyone, all the residences that we've been in contact with. So with that, I would like to end and open up to questions.
Excellent. Thank you, Robert. Yeah, I think a lot of people were really focused on that URBANOpt tool. That looked really awesome. So a few of these questions are related to that. First, I think you may have briefly mentioned it, but is the URBANOpt tool like publicly available, or is there a timeline for that?
So it's being produced by NREL, which of course is it's a national lab. So we're trying to figure out exactly how it's going to be set up. It might be that at the very next project, the underlying engines, the underlying scripts are available, but translating this to a graphical user interface might be something that there might be post-development needed. But our goal is to have these scripts available so that people can take these tools and start to implement them. But like I said, there might be some post-development that's necessary for that.
Okay. Now, so considering that it's underdeveloped, are you expecting that URBANOpt can work in any state climate zone for California?
Yeah, so one of the options actually is to select any climate zone, not just in California, but across the country. So NREL, as I mentioned, the engine for this is Energy Plus or Open Studio. Open Studio is the data visualization, Energy Plus being the building energy model engine. And this has been designed for basically the entire world. So if you have any climate zone, you can plug this in and it will look at the different benefits of or different interactions if you're in a cold environment, dry humid, or a hot humid or a hot dry environment. So yes, it can handle, that's my long-winded answer to say yes, it can handle almost any climate zone.
Great. And then lastly,
one other thing I should mention.
Go ahead.
One other thing I should mention is that for the solar design also, it's piggybacking off of the typical meteorological year 3 solar energy data. So not only will it capture the climate zone, but you can also do solar design in different areas as well.
Great. Now, speaking of that, does URBANOpt do anything as far as modeling energy storage?
So Open Studio, I believe, has some energy storage implemented into it, which means that the individual building modeling software has that included into it. That hasn't been implemented yet in the URBANOpt platform. We're going through the process of translating and doing the scripting to make sure that the different Open Studio libraries can be accessed. I'm not sure if that's going to be available. That's something that could be in the future developed further.
Excellent. I'll just put out the call. That was the, another question here. I guess you kind of talked about this a little bit, but maybe you can jump in a little bit more detail. So once again, what are the tools being used to model the PV solar and those scenarios in there? The question here mentions energy storage. I don't know if you touched on energy storage. I can't recall. But what were some of those?
Yeah, so we've taken a couple different routes. So to do our initial solar PV aerials, We've been using helioscope that allows us to come up with those nice images. For the actual solar PV design and energy storage siting, UCI has actually been working on developing a formal optimization model that will do the siting and sizing of these different technologies, taking into account physical limitations of the technologies, but also local utility rate structures. So, for example, how much energy costs at a home, but also what the value of any exported electricity is based on net energy metering rates.
Excellent. Great. And this may be a question for all of you. Are local small businesses participating and providing input on this program?
This is Robert, and I can start off on that. We have actually had significant interaction with Republic Services, and they're the owners of the waste transfer station, and they're by far the biggest business in this area. They've been a big target because there's a lot of nice parking area for, say, doing some parking shading or some shading, solar shade PV systems. And they've been starting to be incredibly helpful and receptive to the work. Expanding beyond that to other businesses, we've had some challenges. So, for example, one of the businesses in the area recently went through and actually upgraded a lot of their structures to improve energy efficiency, right? So they're looking at us, I think, and thinking that what's the benefit? We already did all this. You're not going to really add anything, just take up our time, right? So there's been some challenges within there. Those are mainly the two different groups we focused on in this area so far.
Excellent. Okay, if anybody has any more questions, feel free to submit. I think that kind of covers us for now. Great. I don't see any more questions coming in, so I think we will leave it at that. Is there anything else you want to summarize, Robert, Antonia, Kirsten? If not, we can go ahead and wrap things up for today. All right, I will take that as a cue to wrap up. So thank you so much, everyone. Antonia, Kirsten, Robert, and as well as Jim. This is really informative. I think particularly that URBANOpt tool seems really awesome. And also thank you to everyone else who was able to participate. We hope you found it worthwhile and valuable. Just a reminder, the webinar and the recording of today's presentation will be sent out to all participants and registrants, hopefully early next week. And this will conclude our webinar. So thank you again for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.